Hey everyone, and welcome back to Healing Growth. I'm Lucky,
And I'm Mika.
and we're so glad you're here with us today. Breakups, they're rough. There's no way around it.
Yeah.
And sometimes it feels like adding insult to injury that your ex is already off with someone new. Like they just bounced back
Right.
and you're still, picking up the pieces.
Yeah, you're like, wait, what happened?
Yeah. So today we're going to take a deep dive into the psychology behind why exes seem to move on so quickly.
Mm-hmm.
Because, listen, sometimes it really is mind-bogglingly fast.
It can be. Yeah. And it's so easy to kind of take it personally,
Right.
like, what's wrong with me? Why am I not over this? Why are they?
Exactly.
But there are actually a lot of reasons why this happens that might not be so obvious at
Yeah,
first.
and that's exactly what we're here to unpack today so we can understand what's really going on and maybe even learn something about ourselves in the process.
One thing that I found really interesting when we were looking into this deep dive is this idea of emotional avoidance.
It's like sometimes moving on quickly can actually be a way to avoid dealing with the pain of the breakup in the first place.
Exactly right. It's like almost like a defense mechanism. Think about it. Heartbreak brings up all these intense emotions, grief, guilt, loneliness.
Oh, yeah.
And not everyone is equipped to or, even wants to deal with that head on.
Right.
So instead of processing those emotions, they try to outrun them. They jump into a new relationship as a way to distract themselves.
It's almost like it's like putting a Band-Aid on a broken leg,
Right?
Like it's not actually fixing the problem, it's just covering it up.
Mm-hmm. And eventually that Band-Aid's going to fall off.
Exactly. And then you have to deal with the mess underneath. So then what happens when that new relationship inevitably, ends or fizzles out?
Well, then they're right back where they started.
Right back to square one with maybe even more baggage.
And that's why, it's so important to actually address those difficult emotions instead of just trying to sweep them under the rug. Another thing that we were talking about that I thought was so interesting is how breakups can really bruise our egos.
Absolutely.
And for some people, finding a new partner is all about seeking validation,
Yeah.
right? It's like, okay, this is proof that I'm still desirable.
Exactly. They need that reassurance that they're still worthy of love and attention. And a new relationship can feel like that quick fix.
Yeah.
It boosts their self-esteem.
Yeah, it's like they're trying to prove something to themselves and to the world. But is that really a healthy way to go about it? I mean, it's understandable to feel insecure after a breakup, but trying to fill that void with someone new without actually dealing with the underlying issues, well, that's not really a recipe for success, is it?
No, it's not. It's like building a house on a foundation of sand. It's just not going to last.
And this ties into, I think, something else that a lot of people struggle with, the fear of being alone. Our society is so obsessed with being in a relationship that it's almost like being single is this, terrible, shameful thing.
Yeah, like you're a failure if you're not coupled up.
Exactly. And that pressure can be so intense that people would rather be in any relationship, even if it's not right for them, than face the prospect of being alone.
Have you ever felt that pressure? Like you need to be in a relationship to be happy or complete.
I mean, I think we all have at some point, right?
Yeah. It's really tough to ignore those societal messages.
It is. It's so ingrained in our culture.
But it's important to remember that being single is not a failure.
Yeah.
It's an opportunity. It's a chance to get to know yourself, to focus on your own growth.
Exactly. To figure out what you really want.
Then who knows? Maybe you'll meet someone amazing along the way when you least expect it.
When you're not even looking.
Okay, so another thing that came up that I thought was really fascinating is this grass is greener syndrome.
Yes.
The classic, right? It's like this belief that the next relationship will be perfect, that it will erase all the hurt and problems of the past.
And it's so tempting to fall into that trap, especially when you're feeling vulnerable and hurt.
Yeah, it's like a fantasy, right? Like this magical thinking that everything will be different this time.
But the reality is that we carry our baggage and our patterns into every new relationship.
It's so true.
Right. So unless we've actually done the work to address those underlying issues, those same problems are just going to keep popping up.
Yeah. It's like rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic.
Haha, I love that.
It doesn't matter how you rearrange them. The ship is still sinking.
Exactly.
So I guess the key takeaway here is to focus on healing and growing ourselves before we even think about jumping into something new.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Now, I know we've talked a lot about why exes seem to move on quickly, but what about those rebound relationships?
Yes. Rebounds.
Let's deal with those. Are they ever a good idea?
Well, rebounds are often fueled by impulse rather than genuine connection.
Yeah.
It's more about coping with the pain of the breakup than it is about actually having real feelings for the new person.
So it's almost like they're using this new person as a crutch.
Yeah, in a way they are, and it's not fair to either person involved.
Right.
The rebounder isn't giving themselves the time and space they need to heal.
Right.
And the new person is often getting hurt because they're with someone who's not really emotionally available.
It's a recipe for disaster.
It can be, yeah. And it's important to remember that if your ex is in a rebound relationship, it's not necessarily a reflection of you or the relationship you had.
It's more about them and their own process.
Exactly. It's their way of coping.
And sometimes what looks like a quick recovery from the outside is actually something else entirely. It's this idea of pre-breakup detachment.
Oh, yes. This is such an important point.
Right. It's like sometimes one partner has already emotionally checked out of the relationship long before the actual breakup happens.
They've already started grieving the relationship and moving on internally, even though they haven't physically separated yet.
So while it may seem like they're moving on at a warp speed to the other person,
Right.
they've actually had a head start on the healing process.
Exactly. And that can be really hard for the person who is still invested.
Yeah, I can only imagine.
Because it feels like they're blindsided.
You're like, wait a minute, you were already over this?
It's like they missed a chapter in the story, so it's crucial to remember that everyone processes things differently and at their own pace.
Okay, and we can't forget about the role of social media in all of this.
Oh my gosh, social media can be such a double-edged sword.
Right.
Because on one hand, it can be a great way to connect with people and find support.
Absolutely.
But on the other hand, it can create this pressure to appear happy and over your ex, even if you're not.
Yeah, it's like this highlight reel of everyone's perfect lives.
Exactly. And it can make you feel like you're not measuring up if you're not posting pictures with your new love or talking about how amazing your life is.
You start comparing yourself to everyone else's carefully curated online persona,
And that can be really damaging.
especially when you're already feeling vulnerable after a breakup.
So my advice would be to take a break from social media if you need to.
Yeah, that's great advice. Unplug, disconnect.
Focus on your own healing and don't worry about what everyone else is doing or projecting.
You know, it's so important to remember that healing takes time, and everyone's journey is different.
Absolutely. There's no set timeline for moving on.
Don't compare yourself to your ex or to anyone else.
Right.
Focus on your own growth.
And be kind to yourself.
Exactly. Be kind to yourself. Mika, this has been so insightful.
It has.
Thank you so much for sharing your expertise with us today.
Of course. My pleasure.
I know our listeners have gotten a lot out of this deep dive.
I hope so.
And speaking of our listeners, we want to hear from you. Have you ever seen an ex move on super quickly? What was that experience like for you?
And how did you cope?
Share your thoughts and stories in the comments below. And if you're loving these deep dives into the complexities of relationships,
Which we know you are.
please make sure to like, comment, and subscribe to Healing Growth for more insightful content like this.
And before we go, I want to leave you with a thought-provoking question to ponder.
Okay, hit us with it.
What advice would you give your pre-breakup self about dealing with the emotional aftermath? It's something to think about as you continue on your own journey of healing and growth.
That's a great question. I'm going to have to think about that one myself.
Yeah.
Until next time, everyone, take care and keep those hearts open.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.